So today I will be going over the book As a Man Thinketh, and within it, its principles, ideas, and my thoughts on them. One of the main principles of this book, and really the only principle of the book, is that your thoughts are the most important thing. Your thoughts will affect everything in your life to a degree that you do not expect and really only experience subconsciously. The author seeks to make this action and this realization to see all of these ways that your thoughts have affected your life a more conscious effort and a more understanded observation. This book goes over that principle in many extensive ways. It says that we should be extremely aware of our thoughts and the ways in which we allow them to cultivate themselves within our minds. Otherwise, we may be inadvertently leading to the downfall of our mental state, health, and maybe even our achievements. As a man thinketh, so he is. The first section of this book goes over our thoughts and how it affects our character and who we are on the inside. Very simply, he outlines in this very first page of the book that thinking good thoughts leads to good action, and thinking bad thoughts leads to bad actions. And so throughout our lives, whether or not we choose to harbor good thoughts or bad thoughts, thoughts of good and evil, that will consciously or not manifest itself into our actions in everyday lives. In short, we are the sum of our thoughts. We are made or unmade by ourselves. By our thoughts, we forge the weapons by which we can destroy ourselves. Likewise, we can also fashion the tools with which we build for ourselves. We are our own maker and master. Each of us is always our own master, even in our weakest and most abandoned state. And right there, he reiterates, he tells us that our bad thoughts are, of course, weapons that we will use against ourselves and our own success. And vice versa, good and positive thoughts will lead us to grow and actually create things and build ourselves, to create ourselves anew. And of course, it says, even in our weakest and most abandoned states. So perhaps no matter how negative we feel in the moment, or no matter how wronged we are in a moment, at that time, we are still responsible for our thoughts and actions. No matter what, you are still in control. You are still responsible for the things you do and the ways you react to all of your situations, to the thoughts you allow into your head in a moment, and whatever those thoughts are allowed to be expressed through our actions. Fundamentally, we are in control and we are responsible. And that's not a bad thing. Maybe it seems harsh to tell somebody they're responsible for the things they do, even if they're in a bad situation. But in that way, we're reminding ourselves that no matter how bad things are, we are still in control. That's what responsibility is. You are in control. You don't have to be at the whim of any emotion that you feel or anyone else's will that they try to impose on you. To see our situations as ways we can be responsible and truly own the current circumstances that we're in, we allow ourselves to do and grow in a better way. So in the next part, he talks about how the thoughts affect our circumstances, which you wouldn't think your thoughts by themselves affect the things physically around you, but they do. And they affect you subconsciously oftentimes through your actions. Because if you constantly are thinking terrible things, then you're going to act terrible. Not necessarily outwardly towards other people, but perhaps towards yourself and what you've allowed yourself to grow into. If you're always belittling yourself, for example, then you're not going to be able to grow into somebody who is more than what you lower yourself to. In the very beginning of this part, he uses the analogy of being a gardener in a garden. There's two things you can do with a garden. You can cultivate it and put certain plants and certain seeds in certain places and water them accordingly, or you can let it run completely wild. And this overrun garden in the analogy is your mind if you allow these terrible thoughts to run wild. These terrible thoughts that you don't weed out. If you treat it like a gardener does and you actually have certain seeds and other flowers and fruits that you want to bear from trees and other plants on the ground to really have a beautiful, wonderful, fruitful garden, you have to prune out all of these weeds and get rid of them so that you can have a organized and purposeful garden that's filled with actual thoughts that you wish to have. One little passage in this book that was really interesting to me, and just to note, again, we are still talking about our circumstances and how our thoughts affect them. This passage reads, "The soul attracts that which it secretly harbors, that which it loves, and also that which it fears. It reaches the heights of its cherished aspirations, it falls to the level of its basest desires, and circumstances are the means by which the soul receives its own." So I really like that. At least that's an analogy that's often used in dating, is that, if you want to find somebody to date, then you should attempt to grow into a person that's worthy of dating. You want to grow yourself and to become somebody who's putting their best selves out forward. That will in turn attract somebody that's doing the same. But what's also very interesting is the part where you will attract what you fear. So if you're always sitting somewhere and fearing something, there's always something on your mind that you're afraid of. There's this simple scenario, this end result that you are terrified of. And if all you do is think about it, all you're going to do is attract it closer to yourself, because you're going to be a person that brings that result upon themselves. There's a saying I heard, and I don't know where it's from, I'll probably put it on screen right now, is that you are your strongest thought. So whatever you're thinking, good or bad, you are subconsciously taking yourself closer and closer and closer to it. And that's a very interesting thing to know, because it shows that it's true. Whatever we give the most mental bandwidth to, that's where most of our mental effort is going to be taken to. If it's not to something that's positive and is going to give us something better in life, something purposeful, some fulfillment, and it's in fact a bunch of failures and things that we're afraid to let happen, then we're just going to walk ourselves off the plank. One does not come to drunkenness or crime by the tyranny of fate or circumstance, but by the pathway of groveling thoughts and base desires. Nor does a pure-minded person fall suddenly into crime by stress of any external force. So it once again reiterates that anytime we make a mistake or do something terrible, it's not because it just happened in our circumstance. It was something external that made us do that. We still have free will. We still possess the choice, no matter what situation or scenario we are put in, to make the right choice, to make every decision for ourselves. There's nothing making it for us but us. And by understanding and realize we have that power and that responsibility, we actually have the choice and the power in the situations. We don't have to give in to any sort of fleeting thought or fleeting feeling in the moment. The usual conclusion is that one person fails because of his or her particular honesty, and the other prospers because of that person's particular dishonesty. This is the result of a superficial judgment, which assumes that the dishonest person is almost totally corrupt and the honest one is almost entirely virtuous. It is pleasing to human vanity to believe that people suffer because of their virtues. Good thoughts and actions can never produce bad results. Bad thoughts and actions can never produce good results. Suffering is always the effect of wrong thought in some direction. As we adapt our minds, we cease to name others as the cause of our condition, but begin to build ourselves up in strong and noble thoughts. We cease to kick against circumstances, but begin to use them as aids to more rapid progress and as a means of discovering the hidden powers and possibilities within ourselves. He then begins to really get into how certain thoughts and actions, good or bad, can manifest themselves into good or bad habits. When focused on bad things, we habitually do bad things that align up with our bad thoughts. And when we purposefully try to think good things and we try to put the best thoughts and put the best fruit in our garden, then what we get back is the fruits of our labors and our efforts. And our actions, specifically our good actions, become easier to do. It doesn't become a chore to fight against bad thoughts because good thoughts are already behind us, backing up our actions. A particular train of thought persisted in whether it is good or bad cannot fail to produce its results on the character and circumstances. We cannot directly choose our circumstances, but we can choose our thoughts and so indirectly yet surely shape our circumstances. Very simply put, we don't get to choose the situations we are born into. Other people have more advantages than others, and others have more disadvantages than others. If we sit and compare circumstances and try to attribute that to everybody's success and or actions, we won't really give ourselves the responsibility and the power invested in such responsibility to change our circumstances. You can't change the cards you're dealt, only how you play the hand. Everybody gets dealt different cards, and everybody has to play their hand the best way they possibly can, based on what cards they get dealt. And people that pretend that whatever they're dealt in life contributes to either their success or downfall are both wrong, when it was truly their actions in response to that hand that got them to where they are currently. Put away weak and sickly thoughts, and opportunities will spring up on every hand to aid our strong resolves. Encourage good thoughts, and no hard fate will drag us down to wretchedness and shame. To encourage good thoughts, good circumstances arise because our good thoughts encourage our habits, and our habits will encourage our circumstance. But it all stems from what we tell ourselves, what we believe in, and what we allow to grow in our mental garden. Now, this one is actually one of my favorite segments in the book, and it's about purpose. So, right at the beginning, they who have no central purpose in their life fall an easy prey to petty worries, fears, troubles, and self-pitying. So immediately I have thoughts on this. What is the difference between happiness and fulfillment? Very simply, happiness comes from something lower than us, and fulfillment comes from something bigger than us. Fulfillment comes from things that simply have higher importance than us. If you have a spouse, for example, if you have children, for example, those things come before you. They do. That's a rule of life. And they are more important than you because you have decided to include them in your life, and there's no real taking that back. Things like children and a spouse, there's no, but I want to focus on me now. No, there is no you now. There is the things that you serve. And you serve those things because they are of higher importance than you. You have to humble yourself for things that are more important. You have to humble yourself to have a purpose in life. You have to understand that there is something more to gain. There is effort to put forward, and there is something that you are not worthy of possessing yet until you put the work forward and actually do what needs to be done. When we have these things that are more important than us, you have a higher purpose that you wish to serve. Actually coming to yourself and coming to your senses and really getting down to the meat of it and trying to understand yourself and what it is you want out of life, or not really what you want out of life, because what you want out of life is happiness. A piece of cake gives you happiness and it's what you want, but fulfillment comes from a bunch of hard work that maybe isn't enjoyable the entire time, but man, once that ball gets rolling, all of a sudden you are feeling absolutely fulfilled. One of the most fulfilling things in my life is when I get to spend some really quality time with my closest friends. I try to have a gathering like once a week where we hang out in my room and talk, or talk around a campfire outside and I make a communal meal for everyone. And I realized this feeling of being absolutely perfectly fulfilled and at home with this feeling and with these people around me. It was through realizing that I found that there is things that are very important and things that have to be cherished. My analogy is that everybody's got a cup. Everybody's got a cup that's like your meter. Everybody's got like a soul meter. And if you pour out all of your efforts and your being into something that is lower than you, if you just put all of yourself into something else, your cup's empty. You don't get anything back from that. You have only spent yourself to get whatever little enjoyment you got for it at the time of just putting all of what you are out. If you pour your cup into something bigger, perhaps, there are things that are bigger than you by law of the world, like children or spouse, like I said, for example. And if you put all of your effort into that, into those relationships, into raising a child, then what you get back from it, your cup's full again. Your cup fills itself, even more so than what you put into it. You put a little bit in there to bring everybody over for a quick gathering. You don't put that much effort into the planning of the event. You don't put that much effort into like the food of the event. You order some pizza, you invite everybody, you say show up at this time. Half the people show up late, but it's still cool because you're happy to see your friend. And that social gathering and that wonderful community that you've put together absolutely fulfills your soul. Without that, while we say like, oh, just do what makes you happy. No, do what makes you fulfilled. There are things that fulfill you. There are things that make you happy. Now, the things that fulfill you can also make you happy, but things that only make you happy, only make you happy. They don't fulfill you. As physically weak people can make themselves strong by careful and patient training, so people of weak thoughts can make their thoughts strong by exercising themselves in right thinking. To put away aimlessness and weakness to begin to think with purpose is to enter the ranks of those strong ones who recognize failure only as one of the pathways to attainment, who make all conditions serve them, and who think strongly, attempt fearlessly, and accomplish masterfully. Will to do springs from the knowledge that we can do. By simply understanding ourselves and knowing these are the things that we can do, that gives us the will to do them. It's hard to have the will to do something you don't believe you can do. In fact, no, it's hard to have the will to do something you don't think you can do, but you can do. If only you knew you could, if only you knew you were capable. We don't really know what we're capable of anymore. We don't really think of ourselves as much. It's really, really sad how as a culture, we don't really put forward our best selves, and we don't encourage that of each other next to us. That's something I see is really, really missing, and this book, of course, is trying to encourage that by saying, if you allow yourself to think in a way that encourages purpose and actual better living and thinking, you will live better and think better. Individual responsibility must be absolute. Yes, responsibility is not a bad word that should take away from you. It actually should add to you, to add to your understanding that you are in control. You don't have to put up with whatever you're putting up with. That's not me saying to do something crazy. That's me saying to not put up with the bad things that you are in yourself. As we think, so we are. As we continue to think, so we remain. We can only rise, conquer, and achieve by lifting up our thoughts. We can only remain weak, abject, and miserable by refusing to lift our thoughts. Before we can achieve anything, even in worldly things, we must lift our thoughts above slavish animal indulgence. Unless we can strongly control our thoughts, we are not in a position to control affairs and to adopt serious responsibilities. We are not fit to act independently and stand alone, but are limited only by the thoughts which we choose. If we are not a person who thinks clearly, steadily, and peacefully, we are not people who are fit for responsibility. At the beginning of this chapter, yes, it does claim to say that individual responsibility is what is most important, but it also prefaces this by saying, if someone is unfit for the position and they attain that power, they are going to do a horrible job with whatever position they've been put in. We can't do that to ourselves, and we certainly shouldn't do it with others, which is why he says that if we do seek to improve our thoughts and our own state of mind, the responsibilities and the things that we can control in our habits and immediate circumstances will come and grow to be things we can control more. The responsibilities will find us when we're ready. Now, this section of the book talks about visions and ideals. Composer, sculptor, painter, poet, prophet, sage. The world is beautiful because they had lived. Cherish your visions, cherish your ideals, cherish the music that stirs in your heart, the beauty that forms in your mind, the loveliness that drapes your purest thoughts, for out of them will grow all delightful conditions, all heavenly environment. Of these, if you but remain true to them, your world will at last be built. The greatest achievement was at first for a time a dream. The greatest achievement at first for a time was a dream is saying that the greatest achievements that we can say happened in human history at one point were some great vision, some amazing dream that some great mind had. And there's a lot of great minds out there that don't realize these dreams. Now, in this chapter, he also goes on to tell a story, a hypothetical of sorts, about perhaps a young boy who grows up very, very poor. And he works a very shitty job. And he works every day at this job. And it sucks and it's miserable. But he has a dream. And one day he wishes to be very educated and very knowledgeable. And he wants to grow as a person and to be very respected. And so out of this dream that he has, he keeps thinking about it. And his actions become better. His efforts become more directed towards this dream, until eventually he's outgrown his current position, and the ideals and the person that he's become because of those ideals, this dream and this vision, have grown him as a person to where he doesn't have to be at this horrible job anymore. And this is the story of many, many successful people out there, is they started from nothing, and their own dreams and aspirations, truly cultivated and allowed to prosper in their mind, and therefore their actions, is what led them to their current success. And that's something that everybody can do and should do. Through doing that, we can grow significantly as people, and doing so will allow us to experience a wonderful life and experience the dreams that we had. Just a fun line right here. It says, into your hands will be placed the exact results of your own thoughts. And just below it says, you will become as small as your controlling desire, as great as your dominant aspiration. So you will fall to the lowest amount of your thoughts, and you will rise to the highest amount of your thoughts. How much those two things counteract each other will determine the end result. And it ends it off by saying, the vision that you glorify in your mind, the ideal that you enthrone in your heart, this you will build your life by, this you will become. Now, with this last section of the book, it's called Serenity. And I'm going to close it for this section because none of the things that the author says in it really stuck out to me as a passage that I should read on camera. But the idea is very simple, that when we attain this level of mental peace and harmony with our thoughts and actions, we get actual calmness and peace. Calmness is very much a gift that people who are in harmony with their own thoughts and actions get to experience. We often don't like being bored. We often don't like being in an environment that's non-stimulating. We often don't like being in a place that is too quiet. Why? Why do we always want to fill up the noise of our ears, our heads, and our hearts with something else? We don't like being alone with our thoughts. Why don't we like being alone with our thoughts? Why are we so afraid of being alone with our thoughts? What is it about us that we are so afraid of being alone with? What are the thoughts we fear? What are the things inside of us that we don't want to deal with, that we're afraid of? The book in this section doesn't really add any actionable steps to get to this sort of mental peace, because it already is trying to express throughout the entire book all the steps we should already take that will inevitably result in this calmness and peace of understanding and state of mind. So I guess I can add my own for this, is that we should really self-reflect and seek answers within ourselves, and to really understand ourselves, and no matter how uncomfortable, the truths are the truth, and that will reveal to us what either needs to be done or has been done. If we truly allow ourselves to take hold of our thoughts, we have to acknowledge what our thoughts are. We have to acknowledge these parts of ourselves we wish to pretend aren't there, that we are uncomfortable acknowledging. In short, our minds want to be calm waters, but they're currently a storm that's raging. And the only way to conquer the storm is to really understand what's going on in our minds. And once we conquer the storm, the waters will bend to us. The currents will no longer drag us wherever they want, and we will be happy and calm and at peace with ourselves. This has been a book called As a Man Thinketh. It is probably one of the best books I've ever read. This is another book on my list of books that just about everybody should read. As you can tell, it probably doesn't just apply to men. And that's simply the verse the title is coming from. This has been As a Man Thinketh. I still don't know how to end a video. Please record that. Please have recorded that. Please have recorded that. Yes!